Welcome to the Divorce TV show live stream, and I have a special guest who's a new member of the Amicable Divorce Network, which is a very special network. I'm lucky to be an ambassador for the network in the UK, but it's international, and essentially it's full of divorce-related professionals who believe that you shouldn't have to go to court, and it's the only one that I'm aware of in the world that holds that so strongly that if you have a different point of view, you're not allowed to be in the network. So welcome, Dankwa, for being a latest member, and it's great to have you because you're adding a very important two very key services to people who need help with divorce in the UK. One is direct access barrister. That's what you are, and you're also a mediator. Is that right?
Absolutely. Firstly, can I just say thank you for having me on your show? And thank you to the brains behind Amicable Divorce Network. It's a hugely important work that you're doing. And I feel very privileged to be part of the network. So, again, thanks.
Tracy Moore Grant, who's is the very much the brains. She created it over there in the States, and then she's spreading around the world. It's a real mission that she's on there, and it's very, very powerful what she's doing. So yeah, I echo that. It's fantastic that she's created this network because it is about being like-minded, because there's different mindsets, and I'm the first to say that sometimes you might need a Rottweiler if someone's trying to abduct your child or move money abroad. There's times where you don't want to mess about, and that the courts are important. But would you agree that the vast majority of the time, for most people's divorces, there is no real good reason why they should be anywhere near a courtroom?
Absolutely. The key thing here, I would say, Susie, is the difference of having a decision made for you as opposed to you being the decision maker. Now, that's a contrast between going to court and being in mediation. And that's something that we need to think about as professionals, but also service users, for those of us going through those patches in our lives. It's a very, very difficult moment, but I would say I'd rather have the decision making process resting with me as opposed to somebody who's never met me, doesn't know anything about my family, and all they know is snippets of information that's been provided within a process, a controlled process.
And what's great about you saying that is that you're speaking obviously as a mediator, but as a barrister, you know for a fact that that it's no panic. No, a lot of people think that going to court is they're going to be heard, they're going to be listened to, that the judge cares a dime about what their ex did or didn't do. They also often don't realise that the barrister that they might be paying quite a lot of money for doesn't know them either. You have very little time with them. But with a direct access barrister, it's a different relationship. So can you explain for anyone listening who's not familiar with direct access barristers how different it is from paying several £1,000s for someone to have a quick look through your papers in the courtroom and then go into battle for you?
I feel extremely privileged in the work that I do and the various facets that I have them. So you rightly said, I am a direct taxes barrister. Traditionally and typically here in England and Wales, to go to court, you would instruct a solicitor and then the solicitor would instruct a barrister. But for people like myself, you can come directly to me and I will form that relationship with you and take you through the court process. I'm also very privileged in that I have what we call extension to conduct litigation. And so that takes me even beyond the relationship in terms of standing up and representing you, but I could also help you with the application forms and the written statement. So you don't have to do it all by yourself. But again, that's the privilege that I have and the extension through the training that I've done.
So, in simple terms, if someone is dealing with, which many of the people I help are dealing with a very, very difficult spouse who normally would be condemned to a court process, but we manage to find ways around that. But sometimes there are things they need to get. So, for example, even though it's legally necessary that both parties provide full and clear financial disclosure. Sometimes you're dealing with someone who's just really reluctant and they don't seem to be able to cough up those bank statements or get that pension report. And although we can go quite a long way on an estimate if necessary to keep things moving, at the end of the day, you really do, it's in their interests really to have an accurate assessment of the finances if you're going to, particularly if you're going to work with a financial expert on how best to split it. So sometimes we do need the court, but we don't have to just give up and hand the whole thing over to the court, which I believe is what a lot of people feel they should have to do. And it's not true, is it? They can come to someone like yourself and go, how do I get that court order? How do I do this bit so I can then get my spouse back on track in a staying out of court process?
Absolutely. And what we do, or what I do, in fact, is to take, obviously, each case by its own unique story and narratives, and then work out a system and a plan in conjunction with the procedural rules that bind us all in looking at the best way to approach the scenario so that it's solution focused for that family and that family alone. So, yes, that's something we can always look at.
So if someone comes to you and goes, is there a sort of DIY, or maybe I can pay you to do this to get my spouse to provide the proper financial details, a court order that does that, you able to support them in that process without them giving up entirely and getting a solicitor and going, they can literally just do that bit with you. Is that correct?
If someone did come to me to say that I've got this aspect of it and I don't want to be very specific, but I need a barrister because I want to go to court for a specific issue order, then of course they can come to me and that's something I can help them with.
Fantastic. And I think that the people often, I mean, I obviously realize that you get solicitors who will refer to you. So we're not having a go at solicitors here. They have their jobs to do. But for quite a lot of people, they could be managing a lot of this themselves, DIY, and then calling on expertise like yourself to do certain bits. Um, a lot of people get confused, or not confused, I think it's a fair confusion around a barrister who is there to go into court and fight the case for their client, right? And then you've got you working, and a lot of barristers who seem to be moving towards mediation. It's a really interesting comparison. Could you say a little bit more about why you are drawn to mediation, and why do you think that sort of litigant knight's mindset that is assumed for a barrister, why are you, so many of you, becoming mediators?
Whilst I can't speak for the others, I can speak for myself personally and what drew me to mediation. I do this day in and day out. And remember, I also do public work, so public law and private law. And I go through number of clients, but I look at the clients that I represent in court and I say to myself, you can, if you had the opportunity with an excellent mediator, resolve this issue as opposed to waiting for some 23 weeks for a Section 7 report, for example, and then a further 2 weeks after that to file your responses, and then to wait for a hearing, which may not necessarily be the final hearing. Things that motivated me to look at training as a mediator. And bear in mind, I'm not only a family mediator, I'm also a special education needs mediator. And that came from, again, the work that I do as a family law barrister, because I tend to work with families who have children who need special arrangements with school and services. And again, I look at it and look at how the local authority have reacted to those families, the lack of support. And I say to myself, well, what can I do to help families in general? those were the things that ignited me to look towards training to become a send and family law mediator.
Well, yeah, and you've got some other talents as well, because your profile on LinkedIn is quite impressive. Can you tell us just a little bit more about the kind of work you do, also outside of mediation in the courtroom?
I'm a keen social mobility advocate. I believe that as a profession, we must at the very least be representative of the populace that we serve. And so I do a lot of work with modern families, those who subscribe to the LGBTQ plus community. But in addition to that, I've recently been elected as the vice chair of the Young Barristers Committee. So I serve a general populace of all practicing barristers in England and Wales within 7 years of practice. And I'm pleased to share that in last year I was the winner of the LexisNexis Family Law Awards for in that category as a young barrister. So I'm very privileged in the work that I do, but it shows the extent of the commitment to other areas in the community as well.
Congratulations, that's a real accolade.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Um, so to round off, I'd love to hear a little bit what you have to say about if you're talking to people who still think that, yeah, I've got a difficult spouse, I can only go to court, because you know the reality of court. Can you say a little bit about the misconceptions that some people have about going to court, the beliefs they have that are, are misguided, and then and also the on the other side, the benefits of mediation you've already explained quite rightly. It's about you're making the choice yourself, you're not handing it over to someone else. But any other benefits that you would like to share?
Two things: delay and costs. Going through court is an extensive process. Let me set this out practically for you. For example, if you're going through a children related matter, you'll file the application. You will then have to wait for Kafka's to provide what is called a Schedule 2 or a safeguarding letter. That could take some time. In some places, it takes about 8 weeks for the letter to come through to the court, and then a hearing is listed. If there are allegations of abuse that require a determination by way of a split hearing, what we call a fact-finding hearing, you will then have to wait to provide statements. So again, another 2 to 3 weeks to provide the statements, and then you go for what we call a directions hearing or a pretrial review for the court to decide whether in fact there should be a split hearing. Then there is that split hearing, and then you've got to go for what we call a detailed welfare report, which is a Section 7 report. At the moment, for most areas, that's an average of between 18 weeks to 23 weeks. And so, like I spoke to a client yesterday, I said to her, if you file an application tomorrow on Monday, on the 30th, the likelihood that you will be coming as close to a final hearing is on the 18th of March 2027. Then I said to her, however, if you were to call us in the mediation office tomorrow and set up a meeting, you will have your intake meetings in this week, and mediation could be set up next week. And you would have, I appreciate a couple of meetings or sessions, but you'll be as very close to a final outcome in the next month or two.
Yeah.
So that's delay. So practically, that's what it looks like. Then let's talk about cost. Again, we have the family voucher, which is up to £500 towards mediation. That's paid by the government. And then you can top it up. In her case, I was strongly advocating for a child inclusive mediator to come alongside it. So I said to her, in comparison, delay and costs, I will say to you that mediation is the better option. Concluding, I will also share, if you were to go through court and you needed a barrister, the barrister would only get the papers that your solicitor has prepared. So you're speaking to your solicitor, recounting your issues. You then go to court. You feel the need to recount the issue to the barrister. That's about three people, if you have a paralegal in the mix, that you need to retell your story. Retelling your story on every occasion is exhausting. But if you have a mediator, you have a single mediator throughout the process. And that in itself is a bit less daunting. So there you have it.
I think you've given a brilliant description of like it's a no-brainer, isn't it, to attempt the mediation.
Absolutely.
And do you think it's a fair, just to round off, because I'm very keen, the strategies that I recommend to people is, yeah, absolutely mediation, anything you can't decide, an arbitrator can do those bits, all sounds so simple. But when you get stuck on something because, let's say, your spouse just won't provide information they legally have to, you might need to nudge them a little bit with the law, and that's where a direct access barrister can be a very straightforward way they can do that. And am I right in thinking there's a certain amount they can do themselves if they're, you know, low on money and are happy to do the work, rather than just handing it over to you to do the job, which obviously would be much nicer if they can. Do they have that option, that sort of DIY but supported by you option?
They absolutely do. The point about direct access is specific. So you're instructing the barrister for a specific work to be done. What I tend to do with most of my direct access clients is at the outset, I have a conference with them. I then set out plainly what is required at each stage. And then they can, if they feel better empowered to go ahead and do that. So there are various ways to do it, and that's the beauty of having a direct access barrister
It
with
keeps,
you along
yeah,
the journey.
it keeps them in control of the process, really, but working as part of a team
Absolutely.
with the experts.
Ye-
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, so
Yes.
lovely to have you on, and I'm sure we'll get you on again in the future. Yeah, Dankwa. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Enjoy the rest of your day.